And good morning to all those tuning in. We're in session 7 of our quarterly Bible study here. Let me get to the section that we're at. 20. Oh, yeah. Let me look at this real quick. Yep. So this isn't the one that we recognize as the Deuteronomy's list of the Ten Commandments, but this is when they're first revealed, right? It says the session's over the whole section. But the Bible study author wants us to look at specifically the memory verses are 22 and 3. And it says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the place of slavery. And then verse 3 starts the 10 commandments. Says, do not have other gods beside me. And I'm reading out the Holman Christian Standard. If we look at is this the King James? Make sure this is the King James. This is not. Does it say? Yep, this is the King James. Okay. Remember what's quoted more is the Deuteronomy version of this. But in the King James it says in beginning of verse 2, I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Again, the point there being that there's only one God, and there's no other gods that we can recognize, that we can worship. We're not supposed to identify anyone else. And so, right out of the gate, the sense is he's the only one, and because he's the only one, he's the one that sets the standards, right? And the reason the Ten Commandments are so important is because they give you standards to which to live by. And that's what the Bible study author wants us to study on today. And I was just talking to my I say my child, but he's adolescent, getting ready to drive, and I was warning him about some things that will affect the way he can operate equipment, machinery, and all that kind of stuff. And the illustration here the Bible study author has is, do you ever wonder about the bizarre warnings that come with some products? Reading these, do you think what created someone to think this warning was necessary? And I go back and see what they talk about. Companies include these types of warnings. Let's it's funny for those that know, but there are people out there that don't know that will try to, I guess, use products that not the way they were intended. And so it says, like the instructions on a lawnmower, do not use for trimming hedge, or an iron. Do not iron clothing items while wearing them. That's probably a real warning on a product, for iron. Companies include these types of warnings so they won't be sued. But you must wonder if someone tried these things first and the companies added the warning to prevent somebody else from doing the same thing. And it's remarkable the types of lawsuits that are brought forth today in America, because we are the land of the free, and we do have certain freedoms that the other parts of the world don't have. But with those freedoms comes, you know, situations in which they are abused. And I can go back, and one that's famous probably for all generations, right? Even the ones that are on YouTube now, the kids that are coming of age with their tablets and all that can probably research it, is the lawsuit about the hot coffee at McDonald's. And it was a real thing, and there was a real result of it. I don't know the specific details, but the result that we can see today is that on the cup it says warning, content or product contents hot on the coffee cup. And I don't know. I guess today, right? Coffee is you can enjoy it in all kinds of temperatures, all kinds of, huh? Yeah, all forms. I'm waiting for them to have like a ice cup, and you can pour your coffee in there, and yeah, they probably, yeah. So okay. Well, there's a small amount of caffeine in chocolate, anyways, but it's probably enhanced or something. But what we're talking about is the warning labels out there, and the warning labels are needed, because there are some products out there that we consume as humans that are dangerous for us. That the Surgeon General has a warning on cigarettes. There was a new study that came out that they're going to start trying to include warning labels on alcoholic beverages because it's linked to uh, cancer. It's there was a study, and the Surgeon General agreed that they should probably have warning labels out there. So I'm interested in how that's going to affect that industry, because there's a lot of regulation, but it's not apparent to the public. Like I don't know if you guys know, but you can't just go when you have a bar. And I know of this because I was a part of a situation. But when you want to try to run a bar, you can't just go to the bottle shop and buy your contents. You have to get it from a distributor. There's regulations, but people aren't aware of them because all they know is the drink, right? Well, that's the case. That's the reason that they're going to start trying to include the warning label, the Surgeon General's warning label on there, so people have an idea that this is dangerous for them. Because if I don't know if you know, in America, the I don't know if it's the CDC or the American. There's an organization that said you can have so many drinks a day and all that. And us as Baptists, we try to promote what's that called? Abstinence, right? Not to have not to imbibe in that way, huh? No, we don't submit. We want to have our freedoms, and we don't want the government overreaching and all that. But what's that? Actually, during Prohibition, the women, what were they called? The teetotalers, right? That's the idea that we try to promote, is that there are other beverages that you can consume and don't have to get drunk and all that type of stuff. But the point is the warning label's coming, and just like here, that's because there are situations that we encounter that lead to certain things going on. And that's the idea that the Bible study author is trying to promote with the Ten Commandments here. We couldn't do things in a way that was suitable for God, that kept us holy, right? So He gave us rules to live by. And the first one, right out of the gate, there's no other gods. There's no other gods beside the one true God, the Lord Himself, who sent His Son, who's in this time is gonna tell us about a prophecy and going to save His people. But at the time, right, He's the only one that they should recognize. Now, there are they're gonna meet other cultures. They're gonna encounter other people who maybe have multiple gods. And the reason that the Lord gave this is so that they have standards in which to live by. And so that's what the Ten Commandments represent for us, is those guiding principles. Now, if you take them as law, right, you could live a good life, but that it's not enough to be able just to live strictly by those and be able to go throughout life not really knowing intimately God, and then ultimately failing at trying to be holy, right? And that's the reason that we're going to go over this on the with the Bible study authors talking about. So what are some bizarre warnings and instructions that you have read about? So what do you think about that warning? I go back to, I can't remember how old I was, but you guys remember the Tide Pod thing when social media really started blowing up, and they started to try to have trends. Yeah. Well, it was young adults and adolescents that were trying to get famous and all that type of stuff. But now there's there's a warning on the dish detergent, the laundry detergent packets. It says "Do not consume." I was like, because I wasn't a part of that, but I'm in that generation where social media has engrossed us, right? And that's what we try to our population is trying to make a career out of it at some point. And that's the problem with just going along with the crowd, right? If you don't really know what you're doing, then you could end up hurting yourself. And so that's the reason that warning is on those products now. And it's all because people just wanted to be cute and I don't know, show off, or yeah. So that's one that I am familiar with and seen for myself. the wording on there, old laundry detergent. It didn't, it just said don't be mixing with other chemicals or other products, because it could create a gaseous substance or whatever, and you could pass out. It's not funny, but it's like, some home chemist or whatever trying to concoct something, and they fall over because they made mustard gas or something like that. It's crazy. It's probably happened before, right? So that's the reason the warning is there, and that's what the Bible study author wants us to talk about. Is there any other bizarre warnings that you guys know of, that you guys seen? And I've seen the coffee, the McDonald's cup, because I drink coffee. It says contents hot on there. Yep. Yep. Trying to be trendy. The carabiners that you guys use for rope climbing, not the knockoff ones, but the ones that are just like supposed to be for keys and everything, how they have that on there, do not use for climbing, and it's probably because, hey, this looks like I could and they probably went out and tried to use it, right? Wouldn't hold a golf bag. Oh yeah, and I think that's what the Bible study author is going to talk about here. Rephidim had been a trial of Moses's and Israel's faith in the Lord's presence and provision. The Lord miraculously and graciously supplied them with water. Then he empowered Joshua and his regiment to defeat the Amalekites. The first explicit mention of Moses writing the Pentateuch is found in 1714. He built his first altar named Yahweh Nissi, the Lord is my banner, in verse 15. No more than a day's journey from Rephidim was the Sinai wilderness where Mount Sinai Horeb stood. If the people had any idea where they were, they would have wondered why their 3 months of traveling had brought them no closer to Canaan. But their spiritual location was God's first priority. Surrounding nations worshiped territorial gods whose connection to the people was secondary, but the whole earth belongs to the Lord, and he put his relationship with his redeemed people and their welfare ahead of every other concern. Because of God's earlier promise, Moses knew where they were going and what the Lord was doing. God had made the top of Mount Sinai his throne room, and he summoned Moses, his spokesman, for his initial instructions on how to prepare Israel for their audience with the Almighty One. God was about to formally welcome Israel into his covenant with Abraham. Israel would be God's adopted son, his treasure. They would be his kingdom of priests and his holy nation. They would be the ones who he would use to fulfill his mission to mediate his grace to the world. For their part, the Israelites committed themselves to God, accepting all the Lord has spoken. Their responsibility was to keep their hearts and minds open to him as they learned how he wanted them to live as his covenant people. They had 2 days to prepare for God to descend on the mountain in a thick cloud of his glory, with thunder, lightning, earthquake, and a long, loud trumpet blast. When the time came for their encounter with God, they would see the cloud descend, hear the Lord speaking with Moses, and move up the mountain as far as God's boundaries permitted. There they would hear him speaking the 10 words of chapter 20, verses 1 through 17 directly to them. They would get their first formal taste of the detailed ordinances or stipulations, literally judgments, introduced in 21:1. Oh, which is what they would adopt as laws, right? The what we read about is their so in law, there's actual law that has been passed by the governing body, which is usually your legislature. In the United States, it's Congress, which is made up of the House of Representatives and the Senate, and there's a reason for that. In other countries, they have a system that's similar, right? You might think of them as like elders. They're elected officials that you put responsibility on to create laws that will help further or progress your nation or preserve it. That way you retain the rights that you believe in and traditionally follow. Your legislature establishes the law, but they also might have agencies, right? And we hear about these agencies all the time. The Department of Interior, the Department of Education. For my industry in my career, it was the National Indian Gaming Commission, which is a sub agency of the Department of Interior, which handles all of the Indian affairs. They have a bureau. They have another department that is strictly Indian stuff, and it's called the BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs. And under them, they have all these departments that help govern our status as Native Americans. And so the rule that you can't, that tribes can't have casinos in certain places, that's a law that was written in a law in IGRA. And the way they regulate that is because they have a permitting process for casinos. To have a casino, you have to have a license. You have to apply to the NIGC, and that's where the sub-agency comes in to handle all that. And so the law here from God was the 10 Commandments. He literally gave them as rules, as guidelines in which to live by, and which we shouldn't violate. And that's the way our nation was actually based on. A bunch of the rules that we had when the nation was created was based on the laws from the Lord, the New Testament. The Protestants that came over, they were escaping the persecution from the abuse of the government in our, I don't know, our ally or our sister nation or whatever over in England, right? And they wanted to retain those freedoms that God had given us. They wanted to go back to those basic rules because the rules were getting too much, and we kind of see ourselves in the same kind of situation going on. There's, if you go and you look at any state's legislature and all the laws on their books, right? It's hard to do anything, to create businesses, to have a job in some respects. Like, you can't just go and have a job. You in some industries you have to be licensed. In some industries you have to be a United States citizen. You have to have these qualifications, all that type of stuff. And that's where the rules came in afterwards. So the Ten Commandments are the law, and then all the rules and the what it talks about, and what the Bible study author was mentioning in 21 verse or and on, was the rest of the rules and the regulations that was going to help them live to the standard that God wanted them to live to. But we could just we'll read these first first 17 verses where the Ten Commandments are located. So beginning of verse 1, it says, "Then God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the place of slavery." It says, "Do not have any other gods besides me." That's the first one. Second one, "Do not make an idol for yourself, whether in the shape of anything in the heavens above, or on the earth below, or in the waters underneath. You must not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the fathers' sin, to the third and fourth generations to those who hate me, but showing faithful love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commands." Really, really important. And again, we're not. So let me find the ones that are. Give me like 2 seconds. Oh, Exodus chapter 20. Oh, is it? I was trying to tie this to. I'll figure it out later. But reading on, it's the third one says, "Do not misuse the name of the Lord your God, because the Lord will not leave anyone unpunished who misuses his name." Verse 8, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. You are to labor 6 days and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You must not do any work. You, your son, your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the foreigner who is within your gates. For the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and everything in them in 6 days. Then he rested on the seventh day." Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and declared it holy. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Honor your father and your mother so that you may have a long life in the land that your Lord God is giving you. And then those first 6, right? Well, remember this Sabbath. Why does it have 1, 2, 3? I think the highlights in mine are off a little bit. For 13, it says, do not murder. 14, do not commit adultery. 15, do not steal. 16, do not give false testimony against your neighbor. 17, do not covet your neighbor's house. Do not covet your neighbor's wife, his male or female slave, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. So those are recognized as the 10 Commandments, right? Oh, it's in, okay. The second. Well, I was in the right. I just wasn't in the right chapters. There it is. Okay. So it's in Deuteronomy chapter 5, which is normally the ones that are quoted, right? So in Exodus, he's given them to them the first story about them coming out of Egypt and everything that we've studied, right? But the second telling in Deuteronomy actually is the one that's usually cited as the 10 Commandments when you see it on posters or handouts or pamphlets or whatever. And that's what I was trying to show the similarities in there. Anyways, Israel was given many laws, commands, and statutes to stipulate how God expected them to act as his people. But none of those terms are used here. Rather, the emphasis is on God personally communicating his will to his redeemed people. In this way, God would impress on them that they must take him seriously, as well as the path of righteousness and the peace that he was setting as they learn to enjoy their new freedom. The Decalogue, literally 10 words, was foundational to the covenant, as indicated. It's being written by God himself on stone, and the covenant and the Decalogue being equated in Deuteronomy, and the 2 tablets being placed in the ark, which represented God's presence, and was kept in the most holy place. And I don't know this to be true because I haven't studied this, but the Bible study author thought it was important enough for us to think about it, and in the way that I was just trying to explain, right? Contrary to popular belief, the 10 words were not spread over 2 tablets. As was customary with ancient treaties, the tablets were duplicates, one representing God's guarantee of his covenant commitment to Israel, and the other Israel's promise to be faithful to God. Each tablet was inscribed on both sides. And again, we see this on when they're talking about the ark, how they were supposed to gather everything and put it, and according to what he was wanting, was put it together, and what was the contents of it. So the main point, again, standards to which we need to live by. The first 2 are reiterated again when Jesus arrives. Okay, when Jesus arrives, he gets in so many debates, right? You could see in there, people try to test him. People try to they're not so much testing as they're trying to trap him, because they're wanting to manipulate what he's doing. Okay. They have ulterior motives. They have other objectives in mind other than following the Lord. And so in these deals, you see where it's revealed where they have these discussions. And there's one discussion. Somebody asked him, "Well, what's the greatest of the commandments? Which one should we follow the most, and what's the most important?" Right. Well, he says there's two, and he's trying to. He goes on. He finishes it. He says, "I'm not here to destroy the law, to throw it away. I'm here to fulfill it. And in fulfilling it, he reiterates the first two there, that when they're being brought out of Egypt and they're trying to establish a new life, a new way of doing things, right? Not that they don't get in the same rut, but they want to pursue something new. Well, the first two point to what he's trying to do with them and their new what I like the word treaty, but the new promise that he's given them, that he's established with Moses, right? That there's only one God, that's him, and that you should commit yourself to him because he's the one that's rescued you. And that's more true today than anything, because Jesus has delivered us from that sin that we have committed, or that we're going to commit, that we're involved into today, right? He's offered us salvation because he's paid for that. He's paid for that sin debt. And so the first two right there are the ones that the Bible says. And even though we read all of them, he wants us to really think about those first two. It says, "Do not have any other gods beside me, and do not make an idol for yourself." Because the verse 2, right? "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the place of slavery," right? And when he's made that, when he fulfilled that promise to his people to deliver them a savior, to be able to rescue them, right? He's delivered you as well. Those that recognize that Jesus died, that he was birthed, that he died, and he rose again on the third day, just as it was explained, right? They have that relationship with him. They've acknowledged that he's their savior. They know this to be true. And because they've been rescued, there's only one that can do that, right? And that's I think that's the hard part for those that maybe don't really understand Bible study and all that. Well, we want to learn how to live holy, right? And the first thing that we're introduced to is the Ten Commandments. The big, I guess you call them the broad rules, right? And Jesus even instructed in that, right? So he when he was given his ministry on earth, he was always being tested with this, and he asked, which one is the greatest one? Well, I give you two, because all those are all the rest of the law is based on that, and even the commandments. When we go and we look, and he explains one really, really, well, I think two actually. He explains two that are really, really impactful, even for, at least for me, right? So he talks about adultery and murder, and he says that you've heard it say that, don't murder, but if you have that in your heart already, that you want somebody to not be on this earth anymore, right? Being PC for social media out there, you have that idea in your heart, then you've already committed that sin because it's already in your heart. The fact that it hasn't played out doesn't mean that you aren't capable of doing that, because whatever's in your heart will come out. And that's what he's trying to talk about. You need a heart change. And that's right. And that's the reason I personally like Romans 12:1 and 2, because it's a constant renewal. Because there are things in our lives, there are activities in our lives that are gonna test us, just like Jesus, his ministry. They were always coming at him at a new angle. Well, what about this? What about that? That's the same way we're going to be tested as well. Might even be tempted to do some of these things, right? But it's that heart change that that's going to affect the way we choose, the way we act, the way we behave. And that's it's important because those first two, there's love God. Let me go back to it. I keep going back to it, or I keep wanting to quote it. So in Deuteronomy, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart and with all thy soul and with all thy might. And the first one, it says, the Lord our God is one Lord. And then he goes on to explain the rest of them. Where is it at? Now these are the commandments. I thought my fear is the Lord thy God, to keep all his commandments, which I command thee and thy son, the son's son, all the days of our life. Yeah. So, he explained it again. So it's a little bit different, but that's the parallel here. And Moses called Israel and said unto them, O Israel, the statutes and judgments which I speak in your ears this day, that ye may learn them and keep them and do them. The Lord our God made a covenant with us in Horeb. The Lord made not this covenant with our fathers, but with us, even us who are all of us here alive this day. The Lord talked with you face to face in the mount of the midst of the fire. Explains his position. I stood between the Lord and you at the time to show you the word of the Lord, for ye were afraid by reason of the fire, and went not up into the mount, saying, I am the Lord thy God, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage. Thou shalt have none other gods before me. Thou shalt not make thee any graven image or any likeness above of anything that is in the heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the waters beneath the earth. And continuing on, he says, thou shalt not bow down thyself unto them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them, and talking about the generations that love me and keep my commandments. And then he goes on and explains the rest of the commandments. So it's important to recognize that he's the Lord, and that we shouldn't have anybody, we shouldn't worship anything, including idols that we don't think are idols, right? Money, even time. Time is a gift from God, but we shouldn't worship it as a precious item that we need to dedicate our lives to, right? Preserving time. We should enjoy it because it's that gift. Resources. We talk about money, but you could have one of the things that might sting a little bit, but we had abundant resources as natives before we were discovered, quote unquote discovered, right? We probably took that for granted because it was taken away from us. We probably knew how to manage it well. We see what's going on with the natural disasters and all that type of stuff. We probably knew how to manage it better, but we didn't. It wasn't ours. It was the Lord's, and He took it back. That's the one we recognize that's in control of everything, and so we shouldn't worship things or items above Him, and that's what He's explaining, because He's the one that rescued us. That still applies to today, because He's the one that rescued us from our destination, which we could not save ourselves from. He had to provide that way, and that's the I guess that's the meat and potatoes of the lesson today, along with the rest of the law and the rest of the rules that are going to follow. I don't know that he talks in great detail. I know that we have to because this is only chapter 6. I didn't download next week's yet, but this is a good important part of this study of this particular book, because it shows us that while he was providing food and sustenance, right, he also provided for their spiritual need, and that was the paramount, that was priority for his people, because they weren't going to be allowed to immediately go into the land that they were promised, because they weren't ready, and he was trying to get them ready. He was showing them what they needed, and they needed that heart change, not just as individuals, but also as a people, as a nation. And we could probably use that same thing today as a people, as a community, as a state, as a nation ourselves. We need that heart change to be able to turn back towards him, to have a better life, to be able to promote him and glorify him. Because once we start doing that, right, as a people, we're going to see those benefits. Because he's going to bless us, and he's going to hold to his promise, right, that his blessings are actually going to overflow, and we're not going to be able to keep them, because they're going to radiate to everybody else. And that's the promise. As long as we serve him, he's going to be able to take care of us. And that's the structure that we see setting up, right? So his people were in bondage. They were bad off. He rescued them, and they needed to be a new people, and he's equipping them. He's taking care of them. He's providing for them every single day, food and water, but also he's setting up a spiritual sustenance as well in the 10 Commandments and the law governing how they're going to act and behave. And so, any questions? Any comments? All right, then. Good Bible study. We're going to go ahead and get started and get set up for our main worship. And so, Brother Chris, would you dismiss us from Sunday school?